Well, we had a first by bringing Suzanna Crampton back for her second. We had a first. We did some microphone repairs right before the beginning of the show. It's the coolest
Don't say
backstage
that.
setup I
Then
ever
maybe
saw.
she won't be able to return it.
Hey, Elizabeth. Hey, Chloe. Hey, Mom
Papa
and
Brogan.
Dad. My parents are here. Now, we tried this before. We had Suzanna Crampton on from Zwartbles and Zwartbles. And she's, amongst other things, a shepherd in Ireland and a regenerative farming expert.
Yes, and she makes beautiful wool goods.
She's a woolly Wookiee.
And she's an
something,
author, a
and an
children's
author.
book author.
Mhm. So we have her back because we had the worst problem with broadbandless last time. But boy, this time, everybody, fingers crossed, we're going to do it. It's going to be a thing. Everything's going to work. Everything's going to be all right, as that song says.
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gargone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show.
I had Suzanna on the first and second time because I was sitting here trying to imagine what it would be like if somebody picked a little, like, do you ever hear the phrase God's little acre? Like they found their perfect spot in the world and made their life there and made a living there, wherever that is. And I was like, I wonder if you could make a living in some like remote corner of Ireland, just shepherding or something. That's how I found her.
You did. You found her, and she's there, and
It's like I dreamed her up.
And there she was.
And there she was.
Now, Suzanna Crampton has like an intense following, a lot of fans. So, I mean, hopefully a couple of those will come by and say howdy today as well. But remember, this is, we make this show so you can have all the questions you want. You can ask everything. By the way, did you know, look what I just did. The show is sponsored by StreamYard. I forget to do my ads at the beginning. So you can make a show just like this. You can, set up a duck, turn it just the right way. And next thing you know, video comes out of it.
It's very easy to use. It's easy for guests to join. It's easy for us to show your comments. The whole thing is very easy. You'll love it.
cbrogan.me/StreamYard. Come get some. Hey, if you want an audio version of this show, you can get that anywhere that there's a podcast. Just go to castos.com for hosting, though, and you can start your own, too. We use it. Also very easy. You see a theme here? We're into easy.
It's true.
Baby, I'm easy. I'm easy. I'm easy. I'm an easy man. All right. Let's get us a Suzanna Crampton and start asking questions. Hello.
Hello. A second time.
We made it.
I know. Fingers crossed. And I'm on time today.
So
super early even.
Let's do this. Let's find out what people do and don't remember from last time. Zwartbles. Can you talk to us a little bit about these creatures of yours that you manage up in the hills?
Well, I'm actually down in a river valley, the beautiful Nor River Valley in southeast Kilkenny. The Zwartbles are a breed of sheep. Here, I can show you a picture. They are black with, wrong way. I'm not very good at this mirror imaging.
Well, you can rule out a career in weather.
And they're from an area called Friesland in the Netherlands. And you can milk them, you can use their fleeces for wool products, which I do, and you can also eat them. So they're a trifecta breed of sheep, which I have here on our farm in Southeast Ireland in Kilkenny. So, yeah.
Along the way, you have not just decided to raise sheep, you've decided to make this an entertainment project. You have lots of creatures who have their own Instagrams and Twitter accounts and everything like that. You have a lot of famous people. How did that come about, and what made you decide we could tell some of the story that way?
Well, basically, it was fan-driven, completely fan-driven, in that I started off on social media just to sell rare breed sheep. And the characters evolved in the videos, and like Inca, the world's smallest sheepdog. Then there was Bodacious, who ended up getting a book written by him through fan demand years ago. I started on Twitter like 11 years ago, and it was basically just to sell the sheep and the meat to other breeders. And that was purely it. And because of my photography and the videos, people first they wanted the yarn. Then I had to produce so much yarn that before the woolen mill would take me on, that I had to find all the rare sheep breeders across Ireland that had Zwartbles sheep and collect all their wool. And I had so much yarn, I knew I wasn't going to sell it, even though it's 100% natural and black and no dyes involved. There were a lot of people who don't knit. So I then had to design a blanket. So this is one of 3 blankets that I designed. And the design is based on the sheep. So it's a black sheep, but it has 2 white bobby socks, a white blaze, and a white tip to the tail. And that's the basis of the 4 stripes. And this is the travel rug, which has the tassels, which is a very traditional kind of Irish blanket, which when you were in a pony and trap or a donkey and trap, you would have this would drape over your legs to keep you warm. So it's called a travel rug. And it's of a traditional heavy weight. It's not light and fluffy. So it can be used through generations. And then I have a bed blanket and then a small cat blanket. And the cat blanket, again, was designed because fans of Bodacious wanted it. Then I was hunted out by, I think I was at one point in 2017, I had 5 or 6 different agents, and the equivalent amount of different publishers, if not more, pursuing me to write a book. And I panicked and phoned up a friend of mine. This was the week before I was due to go on a lecture tour to the USA. And I phoned this friend of mine on the Wednesday, and he said, I think I have somebody who's coming back from the States on the Tuesday. I spoke to this woman, and within 4 days of conversations on the phone, I had an agent. Within days of me leaving to the States on the Monday, she got a bidding war going between all the publishers who had approached me, till I got this huge advance for a non-pursuing writer who's dyslexic. So it was an extraordinary, there's Bodacious. It has not yet been published in the USA. It's been published in England and Ireland. It's translated into German, French, Italian, and Japanese. I've had Japanese film crews over here before. Sadly, Bodacious died on St. Bridget's Day in 2019, which St. Bridget's Day is a very agricultural day. So it was very prophetic that he had died on that day. And he had a huge following of people and fans. And to backtrack slightly, we had the film crew here while he was still alive, filming him. And the wonderful man who was doing the filming would have been the David Attenborough equivalent in Japan, who loved cats. And we happened at the time the film footage is gorgeous of Bodacious. And this is Time, the new kitten. Bodacious, because of his death, and another cat character I have here on the farm, Miss Marley, they both died. I then got 2 kittens to fill in the ratter gap, as it were, because on a farm, if you're farming for nature, you don't want to poison rodents, because then the owls and the foxes and all the other animals that eat the rodents can be poisoned as well. So I have to do it as naturally as possible, which is where the cats come in. And basically, through this whole thing, I've always farmed with nature. My agricultural education came from Stirling College in Vermont. And it has always been part and parcel of how I farm. There were times when I used fertilizers and things like that, but that was to turn the land around from an intensity to a less intensity, while I changed over the grasslands from mainly one kind of a grass to a multi-species sward. And so it was a whole evolution, and people have followed me on that. And I mean, the extraordinary thing was my Patreon account. I had for years some lovely people telling me to get onto Patreon because they wanted to support me. They didn't want to buy the products. I do sell a calendar every year and cards and things like that. And people love and are very generous at annually buying their calendars and giving them as
Do you
gifts.
have a calendar,
But
Susanna?
sorry.
Can we see a calendar?
Oh, help.
Do you?
I don't have one.
Okay. No, I'm
Well,
just
the new
wondering
one,
what that
the
looks like.
2022 calendar is
You
in the
do.
works.
Okay.
So it's not ready. I only have the 2021 one. And
I
I'm
just
so
want to
sorry I
know,
don't
how
have
do
a
you
calendar to hold.
do you choose like the hottest sheep for that, or like what's the
Well, it's a
selection
mixture.
process?
It's a mixture of all my photographs. It's the best of the photographs. And I get several people to go through them and say, not that one. Oh, I love that one. And sometimes they choose photographs that I would never have chosen. And they say, no, and it ends up being the most popular. So I try to have as many people involved as possible, because one is never always, one is definitely never always correct. So it's always good to get input from other people, because
I always say we're
one
not
of these
always
things
right, but we're never in doubt. That's right.
good term, good term.
Oh, there it is.
Absolutely. So that's how it all evolved. And also I found that using animal characters kind of helped educate people about farming and food and where it comes from and all these kind of things. Because here in Ireland, during the 1960s and 70s, there was troubles in the north of Ireland. And when I was very young, a lot of mothers and children were brought as refugees to the local military barracks. And my granny here would go in and fill the car. This is before health and safety. The car would be chock-a-block stuffed with children. And we'd bring them out to the farm. And these were all inner city children from places like Derry and Belfast, where all the troubles were occurring. And we would show them around the farm. And the impression I got is with me to this day, that these children hadn't a clue where food came from. They were absolutely disgusted that milk came from a cow. They were appalled that potatoes were dug out of the ground. And they wanted to eat green apples off the trees that weren't ripe and would get belly aches. And so through most of my life, it's always been trying to get people to understand where food comes from, where healthy food comes from, and things like that. So it's, and I was a photography teacher for a number of years, and I worked for a wildlife charity in Southeast Asia, which was very, very interesting experience.
But you're rattling this off like it just happened, like it
right,
literally
like it
makes
just
sense.
wandered in. Yeah. Carrie and I had the same thought. It sounds like with hindsight, this all fits a perfectly nice puzzle. It doesn't seem, you couldn't have possibly have thought this all. You couldn't have been like 7 and saying, one day, and then you start plotting this course. How did that happen? How did you pick the various things that made you all that you are now?
I went with the flow. Basically, I have always loved animals. A lot of people have said that I'm touched with animals because they respond to me. I never really believed it. I just read their body language and they read mine. I never really believed I had a unique ability to converse with animals until I was working for the wildlife charity in Southeast Asia. And these scientists realized this, and they were collecting DNA from a particular species of primate. And they asked me, they'd seen me with some young tigers who had approached me and cuffled. That's tigers purring. And I would scratch these tigers in the ruffs on the cheeks here, and they would act like a cat and go, oh, yes, more, more. And if I came to these enclosures and didn't talk to them, they'd get very cross until I went over and talked to them. And these scientists saw this, and they said, well, can you come help us with these primates? We need to yank a few hairs out of each one to do DNA analysis to figure out the families and who's related to who, et cetera, and who we need to take out of the enclosure. So I went over and and I can't remember what species of primate it was, but it wasn't a common one. It was one of the rare ones from one of the places I was working in. I think it was in Indonesia at the time. And the bars were there, and I was on the outside of the bars, and the monkeys would come over, the primates would come over, and I would pretend to groom them. And then I'd pretend I'd found a tick or a mouse, and I'd yank some hair out to get the roots. And the monkey would turn around and go, "Ow, that hurt." And I go, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And then I'd hand it out the back like this to the scientist, who would grab it and put it in an envelope. And I did that for a whole series of different primates. But then the scientists sometimes played awful tricks on me. And there was one time we were in the rainforest to collect some information. And we were walking down this one side of this stream, and they said, "Oh, can you go over there? We see something that is kind of interesting." Now, they knew exactly what was on the other side of the bank of the river, because they'd been collecting data on this route regularly. And I started climbing up this bank, and it suddenly sounded like I'd stepped into a nest of rattlers. And I froze, and I was like, "What have you done?" They said, "Oh, don't worry, it's just ants." And they rattle the inside of grasses, and it makes them sound as a whole community. They'd rattle the grasses. So you'd think you were about to be bitten by something ferocious. And I was furious with the scientists, and they were all splitting their sides on the other side of the river.
See, now I feel like I should study a lot more things so I can play a lot more jokes, but I have just a few comments that have come in while we're talking. Elizabeth loves the calendar photographs. Different Elizabeth says it's true, and I remember seeing my first dairy farm and almost gave up ice cream, and eventually did later, but lactose intolerant and gluten-free now. That's a journey. And she says, smelly, but cows are cute, and it's hard to eat an animal that smiles back at you. Leslie loves how your business started as a farm, but has become so much more than that.
So let's talk just a wee bit about this. But first, I have to put you backstage for a second. I have to read a couple ads. It'll be 60 seconds. Don't anyone go too far. And everybody remember that we get a chance to talk to the coolest people.
We really
Feel
do.
free to ask them any questions.
I was
It's so
literally
great.
like, I wonder what life is like when you're a sheep farmer in Ireland.
And now you
Wonder
know.
how that- I do.
We're sponsored by Presearch. You can go look up all the questions you have about those Zwartbles sheep and everything else you need to know. Presearch.com. It's stick it to the man. You don't need to use Google.
If you don't like how Google does things, there's an alternative, and it's darn good.
Mm-hmm. Hey, do you want to make a domain for any one of Suzanna's creatures? You can. Just go to cbrogan.me/online and you can get a .online domain, but use the code Chris and you can get that .online domain for $1 for the first year.
That code's all caps, everyone.
Code's all caps. All right. Hey, are you in California? Do you need a lawyer? Well, Mitch Jackson is California's #1 leading trial attorney. Good guy, lots of opinions, wonderful person. Hung out with him a bunch of times at a lot of different conferences. Also on the bleeding edge of technology and more, and an incredible newsletter at his site. Go to streaming.lawyer to get all things.
You
Mitch
said lots
Jackson.
of opinions, like you don't have lots of opinions.
Well, he's a lawyer. He writes them. See, opinions.
Oh.
There's a logic.
They don't.
Shh.
Okay.
You told me the other day lawmakers wrote laws too. All right. Politicians or something. All right.
Politicians. Yeah.
So you say. Let's grab Suzanna. So regenerative farming, what the heck is that? I mean, we know how we're supposed to be organic and all that. What are you doing that makes it different than that?
Regenerative farming is basically regenerating the soil. So you have to think of the soil and the microbiology and the mycorrhizal life and the bacteria and all these different things that need to be in a healthy soil. All the springtails, the dung beetles, all these things need to be in healthy soil. And what's happened is with agriculture and farming is they've become dependent on an intensification through artificial fertilizers and limes and lots of tractors going across the land, and also monoculture of crops, be they ryegrass for grazing or corn or maize or potatoes or cabbages. And plowing the land releases carbon into the atmosphere, whereas a multi-species sward, which is many species in the pasture land, which includes herbs and legumes and wildflowers and so many different grasses. For example, dandelions. Most people think of dandelions as one species, but there are hundreds of different species of dandelion. And I can walk through my fields here and I can easily pick 10 different dandelions to show you that there is a multiple of species of dandelions. And regenerating the soil means having all these different species, and your livestock are grazing it in a kind of ancient traditional way of mob grazing. They're always moving, so they don't always eat the sweet bits all the time and go back to them so that they become extinct in that pasture land. And the other thing you need with the livestock are the dung beetles. And dung beetles are as important as pollinators. We all hear about how important pollinators are to pollinate the food, the fruit, the vegetable, the fruits. All of the different foods that we grow need the pollinators. You don't want to be going around with a little paintbrush to pollinate like they do in places where the pollinators have all died and they need to produce food. So the same is for dung beetles. Exactly. The dung beetles are in all different countries around the world. They did have to get introduced to Australia, but except for Greenland and Iceland. And we have about 40 different kinds of dung beetles here in Ireland. And it's something that myself and a lot of other people have been trying to get people aware of, the vital importance of herbivores and dung beetles and multi-species swards of grasslands, because you get the different depth rates of different root structures that go to different depths in the soil that bring up different vitamins and minerals. And the dung beetle digs down in and is bringing in the manure and the minerals in and bringing other things up, which the plant life then brings up with it. And the dung is also microbiology and microbial life, which is really important. So the ruminant, which is the cow, the sheep, the goat,
The pooper.
poop, is hugely important to a healthy soil, which also makes for healthy crops. So you know, I'm sure with food and all the conversations with people, everybody's talking about hydroponics and you can make these apartment blocks. To me, that's sterile food because no microbiology is involved in it. And for us as humans, we need the microbiology is hugely important. It's what makes our brain work. It's our digestive tract. It's what keeps our skin healthy. We are microbes. We are mycorrhizal life as well. That's a kind of funguses and things like that. And they're important in soil. And the herbicides and insecticides and fertilizers kill all those things off. So we need to have all these kind of things cycling in the soil for health. The southeast of England, which has been in tillage for hundreds of years, is now having to bring back livestock to rotate through their tillage systems to rejuvenate the soils with the microbiology within the soil. It's one of the reasons why cows are always being accused of burning down the Amazon. When you chop down a rainforest, you are getting rid of all the life which is above soil. The soil underneath has very little of the mycorrhizal life. So you throw the grass seed down and you fertilize it, and the cow's microbiology reactivates the soil. And then
Susanna.
soya farmers come in after the cows. It's all very controversial kind of things about the cows in the Amazon, but it's how
Susanna.
they're used.
Hey, Susanna.
Yeah,
Cody
sorry.
had a question.
I'm on my soapbox there.
No,
Sorry.
Cody was wondering, do you need a certain amount of acres per a certain number of sheep? And is there a recommended number of sheep in a herd to keep them happy, like socially?
You would want at least 3 sheep because they are a flock animal. Or if you have, it's good to have like at least 2 cows and at least 3 goats, because they're herd and flock animals. And they need the company. It's good for them to rub off of each other. It's that kind of social network they need. And for acreage, if you wanted to farm it regeneratively, you would at least want 2 to 3 acres for your sheep to move through in a sequence, so that the land got, a good amount of rest, so you had the biodiversity within your small acreage.
Chloe had a question also. Do you think the rise of food allergies is connected to the shift to how we farm now?
Absolutely. Because there was a fascinating research paper that came out several years ago, I think, and it was very interesting about foods. And basically, they had, I think, like 800 or 900 people involved in this research. It took place in the USA. And what they did is everybody had to do a food diary, but they also had to send the researchers their poop once a week. And they analyzed everybody's fecal matter to see if the food diary, what was digested and what went through the system and what didn't. And you were supposed to also say what medication you were on, what vitamins you were taking, and you had to pay to be part of this research. It wasn't a free research thing. And what was really interesting is that the amount of nutrition that people got who ate less processed food was much better that they absorbed than, for example, those who ate more processed food but then would have supplements. Like if you took a B12 supplement, you would only get a tiny percentage of that. Whereas if you ate foods that were really good and nutritious in a good B12, you would absorb more of it, and less of it would be out in your poop. So it was very, very interesting research. And one of the things they said that was very interesting was to do with our internal microbial life. And they came to the conclusion that one of the conclusions they came to, was that if you eat 35 or more different food types per day, now that means that if you had mixed nuts, each different kind of nut, if you had a mixed salad, each one of those would be a different food. If you had but as long as it wasn't processed foods, then your microbial life is much more active. And that helps your metabolism, as well as your white blood cells, as well as your immunity to fight things off and things like that. It was absolutely fascinating research. And I can't find it now. I've looked for it occasionally to bring it up again. But I remember reading about it, and it was very, very interesting in that respect.
So Paul says, this is one heck of a show. Yesterday, power reading. Today, poop. Paul, this is not the first time we have talked about poop on this show.
We love poop on this show.
We had Dr. Embriette Hyde on, and she is a microbiome researcher.
But also, Paul, note that this is Irish poop. So Paul's in Ireland. So,
is Paul in Ireland? Very good, Paul. Yay.
You can you pay somebody and then you mail them your poop. Is how this.
Well, this was the research project. I don't think that happens now.
I mean, I'm sure it happens. We just have to find the right subreddit.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it does remind me of the time that I went to O'Shaughnessy's pub, and I went over and I cut a little bit off of the chairs up at the front of the bar. Then I went to Linehan's pub and I cut off some of their chairs over by the bar. And then I went to McCready's and I cut some of the parts of their chair off the bar because they said I needed to submit stool samples. So
you are bold.
I am terrible.
You're very bold.
I'm terrible.
Oh, Christopher, I'm going to go and herd sheep in Ireland or something.
Yes.
Well, you're welcome to come visit, and then you can do a live broadcast amongst the sheep.
I would love it.
So we were talking earlier, just a brief moment, about the fact that your sheep are a threefer. You could drink the milk, you could take the wool, and you could eat them. How does one of your Zwartbles stack up against other of their family? Like, because they're three things, are they less tasty or more tasty?
Oh, they're more tasty. Well, particularly one of the things when I have tour groups come through is talking about food, and what you put into food increases not only the nutritional value, but also the flavor. So if you graze a multi-species sward of herbs and grasses and legumes and flowers, the meat tastes better. It occurs also if lots of people now have chickens. So if you have leftover curry, for example, and you feed the leftover vegetable curry to your chickens, over the next few days, your eggs are going to taste like slightly curried. So I suggest you don't give them your curried vegetables because it's kind of tastes off. But it's what you put in is what you get out. So I have a queue of people when I harvest the male lambs that aren't going to go on for breeding. I have a queue of people who want them because the meat is very tender and delicious. So the meat is very good. The milk is excellent. And there's a couple of sheep dairies here in Ireland that milk Zwartbles sheep. I don't personally yet. One day I win the lottery, I can set up and make sheep's milk ice cream. I make a mean sheep's milk ice cream. It is really good because you use less sugar because it's a sweeter milk. Then the wool, the only negative about the wool is it's black, so you can't dye it all the different colors. So basically, that's why it's such a good trifecta. And it makes delicious. I have wool sweaters that people have knitted me that I live in through the winter.
I think it's popular with all the goth kids. So they're going to be just so thrilled to have black cardigans and black, cable knits and all that. So I think you're doing a service for a whole, underserved part of the wool appreciative tribes. We're at a different part of the show. We have to do a couple things. We have to do our person of the day, for instance.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
I had a few I could have chose today, but I'm going to go with Cody, especially for Backpack Show is Scat Fanatics.
Cody.
That's an assertion. So that entitles you to one free apple, Cody. Hopefully you could get one that's organic and it has at least 34 other foodstuffs in it. Make sure you wash it first. Carl shows up just in time for goth cable knit sweaters. And now we're at the part of the show where we've asked every guest that we've ever had on the same question, which is what goes in your backpack? This could be something physical, like an avocado. It could be something metaphorical, like hopes and dreams for the future. Carrie, what's something good and physical that you could throw in a backpack?
A wool blanket from Zwartbles.
Like you're thinking. That was a beautiful looking blanket.
Right.
All right. And then what's something metaphorical we can add to a backpack?
Oh, kindness.
That's a good one. Suzanna Crampton, what are you going to add to the backpack for us today?
Always enjoy a good curiosity about whatever you're interested in life.
I like it.
Always ask questions.
We'll throw some curiosity in there. I think that's a reasonable thing. I'm on the whole idea of the Black Parade from My Chemical Romance.
Cody's on fire. He deserved the title today.
He does. Well, so my aunt Jane raised horses. She's sheltered horses, dressage horses, and took care of them and all that sort of thing, but had a lot of other animals around. My grandmother was notorious for walking around always pointing. She always had her finger out. She learned something about animals and when you point your finger out all the time, and that's basically